I've never seen a diamond in the flesh. I cut my teeth on wedding rings.
Dude, that's pretty cool.
Man, that is a sad clown.
Dude, that's pretty good.
This is The Gloom, bringing you weekly interviews with F3 Omaha PAX, exploring their F3 experiences and finding those sticky elements that create the glue in the gloom.
Shout out to our sponsors: Major Team Mortgage, Omaha Laser Dentistry, Exclusively Eye Care, Liberty Core Real Estate, Avior Wealth Management, and Apex Men's Clinic. We appreciate their support.
Yo, Gloom listeners, it's The Plague, and today I'm talking about getting your finances as fit as your physique. Our very own F3 Omaha brother Jean-Claude, aka Michael Pfluger at Avior Wealth Management, specializes in building personalized financial plans. He understands the journey you walk in life as a man of faith, safeguarding your family and creating a legacy. Jean-Claude is ready to help you plan your finances with intention so that you can live with purpose. And that's just the beginning when you work with the Avior Wealth team. Visit avior.com/F3. That's AVIOR.com/F3 and see how Michael can guide your financial journey today.
Now let's get back to the gloom.
And we're back. Another phenomenal man on the other end of the line. And I'm not just talking about Pony. I'm talking about the guest that we have with us today. Fun fact, I was sharing some F3 stories with my family, and I found out this guy actually used to work with my mother-in-law. And she, just like you'll learn today, had nothing but great things to say about him and his leadership, his contributions to the community. And this guy also was a site founder. So we'll be excited to get his thoughts on that, but founded a site called The Village out in kind of our southwest sector of the region. And we got our man Lincoln Logs on today. So Lincoln or Lincoln Logs, or I've heard people just call you Link. Would love to just hear the story. How'd you get into this whole F3 thing? And then maybe share with us the story of how you got the name.
Sure. Well, my son-in-law, Chicklets, had been doing F3 for several years. And so he and my daughter-in-law both were like, Dad, you really should try this out. It's really been great for Tony and in terms of just his fitness, but it was, more than that. And so he kept bugging me and I kept saying, I'm not going to drive for 30 minutes at 5:30 in the morning to go abuse myself physically. But then when Dragon's Lair opened up in Gretna, he asked me again. And so my excuses kind of ran aground in that it was literally 2 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
And that was right kind of in the midst of COVID or just coming out of COVID. I had been doing a little bit of work fitness wise, just on my own. And so I was like, okay, I think I can go and do this and not make a fool of myself completely. And so I showed up, I think it was May 8th of 2021, I guess, at Dragon's Lair for the first beatdown. So Chicklets, he H'd me. It's never looked back from there. It's just been a great ride.
Who was Chicklets actually on the queue that day? Or
He was. I'm pretty sure it was. I can't remember exactly, but it wasn't too long after that. I think I started out just going on Saturday mornings, which was not a good idea because I was so damn sore working out one day a week. But I remember, and I can't remember who was on the queue, but he took us up onto the Highway 6 there. And we're doing yeahs along the highways. People are driving by, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? This is crazy. But as we all know, it's all in good fun. And so again, it's been a great experience.
That's
for me.
great. And what did you think of that first workout at Dragon's Lair? What were your initial impressions? And then got to hear how you got the name Lincoln Log.
Well, I guess the first thing would be just, God, don't let me die here. And so it was really a survival mode, trying to get through. And, I wanted to leave a good impression. So I'm, really pushing myself and not taking the modify as necessary suggestion to heart. So I probably pushed myself a little harder than I should have, but I made it through. And again, as you all know, as you kind of get into F3, you start showing up more at different sites and doing it 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week, and pretty soon you're in shape, and it's like, okay, I can do this. And certainly it was a little intimidating being an older guy, because I started when I was 62, trying to keep up with all these young
Well, that's
bucks.
not that much older than Chicklets, right?
Well, not that much actually, but of course he's in a whole nother category, as you guys know. Yeah, the thing that again really struck me was just the guys that would come back as I'm dragging my butt at the back of the line, picking up the 6 and saying, "Hey, you're doing great, keep going." And it was never about being competitive. It was just about being out in the gloom together with a bunch of guys trying to get better. And as you guys know, that's the part that keeps us all coming back.
For sure. Talk us through, do you remember the name story, how we landed on
Yeah.
Lincoln
So,
Log?
as my daughter growing up, Jennifer always told the story. They always would ask me, well, how did you decide that you wanted to be an architect? And it's a long story, but, I just had a lot of interest in building things as a kid, and building tree houses and forts. And of course, when I'm a little kid, my mom bought me a set of Lincoln Logs, if you're familiar with what Lincoln Logs are. And so my mom would always say, oh, it was because he always liked to play around with Lincoln Logs. And so Jennifer, my daughter, shared that story with Chicklets. And so it was, there was no like go around and, throw out different ideas. It was a done deal when I showed up. And so Chicklets jumped on that right away and said, well, it's going to be Lincoln Log. There's no other option. So, but,
it's a good name, right? I mean, do you, I'm assuming you're okay with it, or did you have to adjust to it?
No, I'm good. And like you said, when you get a longer name like that, it tends to get kind of shortened to just Link, which is fine. And no, I don't have a problem.
It's always
with it.
funny to hear when guys come in with predetermined names. And it's funny that Chicklets gave you that name because he was predetermined too. He went around the circle. People were like, Dr. Death, Laser Beam, something like that. And Khaki said recruit him. He's like, no. His name is Chicklets. And that was it. There was no debate.
Yeah. And he was pissed because he wanted it to be something really cool. And not that Chicklets isn't cool, but
He's made it cool, right? You can make
right,
it cool
in his own way, right?
Yeah, that's funny. Well, what I would be curious, like, because you mentioned, that you felt like you were dragging at the first workout, but the last, I remember being at a cue of yours on your birthday, and you had us doing, laps around the track, and then 21 burpees because you're born on the 20th, and so. I guess talk us through like the progression of your physical fitness, maybe throughout the last few years, or even, I guess I would be curious, like going back further, did you play sports or any of that sort of stuff growing up?
Yeah, I did. And like a lot of guys, you get out of college and you start, having a family, and you kind of get out of shape. And pretty soon it's like, holy shit, I'm 30 pounds overweight and I couldn't do 10 push-ups if I tried, but it was just, progression. And when I started to get the opportunity to lead some workouts, the thing you always hear is, if you can't do it, don't cue it. Mm-hmm. And, of course, as an older guy, I always wanted to kind of prove myself. And so that particular beatdown, I think I still talk to people today and they're like, holy smokes, what the hell were you thinking? And I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking either, because that was the toughest workout that I think I've done.
I remember somebody goes, because you were having us do the same number of reps as your birthday, which is the 21st. And I'll never forget. It was so funny. Somebody goes, why couldn't you have been born on the 2nd?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we all experience that where hey, I want to really do a tough beatdown. And then you get halfway through it and you're going, what the hell was I thinking?
Yeah.
But it's all good. It's all, you get through it, and we all survive.
Yeah.
Do you remember your second post? Like, where did you go after? So you went to Saturday sites did you kind of follow as we started launching more sites closer to your house?
Yeah.
Or did you venture into town more? How was your approach?
Well, the Dragon's Lair was the only Gretna option at that time. And so then from there, I think we went to Wild Kingdom. And shortly after I started, then I had kind of got a EDH Vlasic to come out. And then Miyagi started right about that same time. And so, we were looking for sites closer to Gretna. And so Vlasic and I would kind of, push him and he'd push me to go more often. So we'd go to Wild Kingdom, and then the Maze were probably the first two. The main stage on Wednesdays. So, we were getting out 3 to 4 times a week, which was great. And then, as the leadership started wanting to try to get more sites, because you get like Wild Kingdom and the Maze, you'd have 30, 40 guys showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when the opportunity to open up the village came around. And then, of course, the dunes started. And so all these Gretna sites started popping up that allowed us to not have to be driving for 15 minutes. It was, 5 minutes, which again has been great. But we were just talking about how we need to get back out to some of those sites that we started going to reconnect with some of the guys in other parts of the city.
Yeah, that part's always tough, especially as we continue to starfish and our sectors continue to grow. I mean, that part's tough. I'm going to go back a little bit. You said that you had started working out like during COVID and found like, okay, I'm out of excuses now. I could start coming to the group, and you're supplementing your workout with F3. I mean, has it been beneficial for at least for the first F piece? I mean, we'll get into the second and the third, but has it, helped you along your journey there in the fitness aspect?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think I've said this before. I'm in the best shape now that I have been since college, and physically, in terms of endurance and you go through that cycle of, you're posting 4 or 5 days a week and you're watching what you eat. And I really, was doing really great. And then pretty soon you start using F3 as an excuse to eat bad. And so as you were kind of talking there was before we started, you can't, if you really want to get in the best shape, you got to take care of the queen as well as the king. And so I've kind of backslid a little bit. And then with my surgery, being down for a couple of weeks in the holidays, but, you just have to push through and get back into that routine. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely been a blessing from a physical fitness standpoint.
And you just had gallbladder surgery? Okay.
Yeah, about 6 weeks ago.
I got a funny story about that. We were at a woodshed a couple weeks ago, and everyone's asking for thoughts and prayers at the end. And Chicklets is, my father-in-law, Lincoln Long's just had surgery. And someone was like, okay, we'll pray for him. He's like, no, he's good. I just wanted to tell you guys. It was just so fun. He was like, all right, he's good. All right. We still did pray for you, but...
Well, I appreciate it.
That's funny. What I would be curious, Link, from your perspective, because I've got a couple people that are in that, late 50s, early 60s that I've mentioned like, hey, come on out, right? You won't be the only guy sort of in your age range that's there, but they kind of get stuck on kind of that comment you made about like keeping up with the young bucks. But it seems like to me, you found a way to like a kind of a track or progression to really let F3 meet you where you were at and then help you attain your fitness goals. So I guess, how did you do that? Or I guess, were there things that the group was doing that made that easier? Or just talk us through that. Like, how do we convince some of the guys we know that may be in that spot in their life where they think they're too old to come be a part of F3? Like, how do we approach that?
Well, yeah, I think you just have to swallow your pride, and again, it's not about being the fastest or the strongest. It's really about just being yourself and doing what's right for yourself. And I think, I've seen a lot of guys over the 4 years that I've been doing it where they get really jazzed and they're zealous about it and they're doing, double Murphs and all this stuff. And then pretty soon they get hurt. Mm-hmm. And then they get out of the routine. And so I've really focused on just be myself. I'm not going to try and do a double Murph and a beat down. I mean, that's not wise when you get to my age and I've learned to listen to my body. So if I'm sore, I'll, take a day off, and really the other thing, and I think you guys probably have experienced this too, is, a lot of guys like to do the ultimate frisbee, and and those are all fun things, or football, flag football. That's the stuff as you get older that's where you're going to risk getting hurt, because it's one thing when you run in a straight line, but when you start changing direction and doing a lot of stuff like that, that's when you start blowing out hammies and knees and stuff. And so just being wise about what you're doing, and not, again, modify as necessary, so that you're not going to be, especially like coming back from surgery. It's like, okay, I can do everything except the core stuff, and I got to just work myself back slowly with that. So it's just being wise, I think, and again, being humble. Don't feel like you have to be that guy all the time, leading the charge. There's nothing wrong with being the six. And again, people are always there to pick you up.
Heck yeah, I love that. And don't be afraid to maybe walk or ruck. I remember a couple times where I can't remember who it was, but I got to the maze one morning to pre-run, and there was somebody there that wasn't able to do that, and they were going to be alone, and I was going to be alone, and it's like, well, rather than being alone on a run, I'll just walk with you, right? And so I think just taking advantage of like you said, listen to your body and do whatever you can. Don't try to overdo it. I think as men, we kind of, our competitive spirit kind of gets in the way a little bit, and it's easy to kind of, especially I remember I went to the launch of the disco, and I remember you get in a game like that and you kind of forget your age, right? Or you kind of morph back into your high school, college days, and you think you're fast and can jump high until you try it, and you're like, wait a minute, something's different here, So, really good advice.
And it's I'm really happy that there's more rucking opportunities, and even with the CSOP, here the other last weekend, having a specific group set up just for that sector of our fellowship, so that they don't feel like they're left out, is really, I think the leadership has been wise in recognizing that that's a part of what we are.
For sure. Yeah, and a lot of that with Coronado, I think Coronado really revealed to us that there's a whole group of guys that we're not meeting because of our intensity level. So I think that's been really cool. Hey, Gloom listeners, it's the Plague. Question for you. Are you ready to perform at your peak? Well, our man Pea Soup and the Apex Men's Clinic is here to help you achieve optimal health. Whether it's managing general health concerns, recovering from injuries, or optimizing your hormones, they have you covered. Their comprehensive services include testosterone replacement therapy, cutting-edge treatments, and personalized care plans tailored just for you. At Apex Men's Clinic, you're not just another number. Their expert team is dedicated to helping you feel your best. Visit apexmensclinic.com today to schedule a free consultation. At Apex Men's Clinic, it's men's health done right. I would be curious as we talk about like the fellowship or the second F piece. One of the things that I've always found interesting is just like our view on male friendships or relationships. But talk us through that from your angle. What's that been like for you?
Growing up, I had a core group of really close friends, and I've been able to maintain those friendships over the years. I'm not the kind of guy that would say that I have an army of friends, but the friends I do have are close. And once I got married and started having a family and moved away, and you kind of lose contact with some of those guys. But I've never really had a lot of male relationships outside of work. And so that's, again, when you look at F3, that's a blessing that I didn't expect to have, but to meet and to know so many guys from different, again, age groups and different walks of life and different, professions and things like that. It's a great networking kind of opportunity, and a great way to just get to know guys at a level that, and you can decide then if you want to take it to the next level of, okay, let's hang out with our families, let's do stuff, activity wise together or whatever. And so, I can't say I have a lot of really close friends from F3, but I've got a lot of good friendships that I've developed with F3 that I'm very thankful for.
That's great. And you know what? You're in a unique position to where you have family within the organization as well, right? You have Chiclet's son-in-law, you've got Miyagi.
Yeah.
Is Vlasic related to you at all?
No, he was my pastor for the last, I don't know, 12
Okay.
years. So that's really only the way that I got to know Vlasic, and we've been friends because of that. I would say though that one of the things that's cool about F3, specifically with my son-in-law, is it's just given us a whole nother level of I don't know if you want to call it intimacy, but just things that, when you get together, it's like, oh, hey, have you been posting? What's going on? And so it really is, it's strengthened the relationship that I've had with Chiclets and Miyagi. And I've tried to get my other son-in-laws involved, but they're not around here, so it's a little tough. But yeah,
Maybe it made it easier for you to allow them to marry your daughters.
Well, that was already a done deal, but
Yeah.
but it's made our relationship stronger because of that.
Mm-hmm. I've told my oldest that's one of the first tests that her, any future boyfriend or fiance will have to pass. They'll have to come to F3, and then that way I've got not just myself sort of evaluating, but I got a group of my buddies that
Well, and that's a great thought, because as a father, and now having got daughters that have gotten married, that's one of the things I've learned is that when you meet a young man, it's the thing you want to know is, how are they going to respond when things get tough? And that was probably the one thing I know in hindsight that I wish I would have realized, but you learn those lessons the hard way. So I think your idea, Plague, is good. It's a great way to test the character of a young man, to see how they respond to the adversity of a beat down and just everything that we go through in F3. So it's a good idea.
We'll see if she follows through. I do know she's only 9, but she did tell a boy at school that was one of my requests. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I'd have to EH his dad, and then he could come with his dad, I suppose, at that age. But But anyway, she's too young to be dating. But I guess one of the things I think for me, and maybe this is just me, but like on the second F thing, what I sort of recognize, and maybe this comes from society or social media, but like the expectations we have for what a relationship involves, like a friendship with another guy, like what that even means. But like, I get the sense that society has way more requirements on the list than what at least my experience has been with other F3 guys. But just thinking about your experience throughout life, like as we're building those close male relationships, I love that you mentioned like, the character piece. How do they respond when things get tough? But what I would be curious, what are some other sort of traits or things that we should be trying to build up in each other as we try to be better, husbands, fathers, friends?
Yeah. Well, I think that, and this, again, I learned this from my own experience and my own failures. Anytime I share my COT, I always try to tell people, hey, I'm sharing this not because I got it all figured out. It's because I had to figure it out the hard way. And so as men, I think we have a tendency, you always hear the joke is, oh, men will never ask for directions when they get lost, that kind of a thing. We feel like we have to figure it out on our own. And I think the lesson learned is that we don't have to figure it out on our own. We've got people around us that can help us figure this stuff out. And so that would be I guess, one of the things that I believe very strongly is that as men, we need to get over ourselves and thinking that we have to be this rock star, I got it all figured out kind of guy. There's nothing wrong with asking, hey, what did you do with your kids in this situation? Or what about your relationship with your M? How do you deal with, the things that we all deal with in our marriages and in our families? And so I think that's the beauty of F3 is it gives us it's a conduit to be able to ask those kind of questions, not necessarily, in a group setting, but, text a guy and say, hey, I heard you talking about this situation, and I'm kind of struggling with that myself, and can you help me? And I'm sure you guys could share those same experiences that F3 has given you, that conduit to be able to tap into the wisdom of other people and things that they've gone through and lessons that they've learned that you wouldn't otherwise have.
Mm-hmm. For sure. When I guess I would be curious in your, because it's kind of one of the things we talk about in terms of fellowship is sort of all relationships, right? So like the concentrica model and some of what you're talking about, just sharing what you've learned from failures, right? Is sort of an informal whetstone, kind of mentoring type of thing. But I would be curious, I don't know if you think through the concentrica, how do you feel like F3 has maybe impacted some of those relationships with your M and your 2.0s?
Well, it's definitely been a positive thing. I think that we have to be careful that we don't let F3 become a substitute for those relationships, and I know that, again, I'm kind of unique because my family's all grown up, and so to get up at 5 in the morning and go to beat down, it doesn't leave my wife at home trying to get kids ready for school and, off to work and all that kind of stuff. So it's a little bit of a unique situation for an older, couple, but it's definitely been a positive. Like my wife encourages me to continue to be involved in F3. There's times where she's like, hey, don't forget about me. Don't forget about, your other commitments with church and with other things that you're trying to do in life. So she's a good balance in that regard, but it's definitely been a positive influence on those other relationships. I think that the other thing when you talk about the concentrica, and I know that F3 doesn't try to be, too much focused on the faith piece, but, in my concentrica, God is in the middle of that, and then my wife, and then my family. I know that, and you look at the F3, God's really not that in the middle of that, but there's a lot of implication that we do need to have that kind of faith relationship somewhere in our life. And so that's part that I think it's really helped me focus on too, to make sure that I'm always got God in the middle of all of it.
Yeah. I've always wondered, we should ask Dred that question. I don't know if he's still an avid listener of the podcast, but I've always wondered if faith is not, your higher power or your God. Like, I think there would be a non-religion specific way that they could call that out. And I've always wondered if in their model or sort of vision of the concentrica, if God is like encompassing it all, right? Or if it is like you're saying, if it's like, based on your faith, you put God in the middle. But I'm right there with you. It's like, you can't, if you're not right with your higher power and that relationship first, right, then all those other relationships could get really kind of twisted, right?
Yep,
Because
right.
you're not getting filled up in a way that you can pour out. But we'll have to, I don't know, someday we'll get to the bottom of that, because I know that question comes up a lot.
Well, and I know that, they specifically don't want it to be about any particular faith or religion, and I respect that. But at some point, we all have to have our faith that we own individually.
Yeah.
And so what is that? And that's, I've not shied away. You've been around some of my COTs plague that you've heard. I always really try to focus on the third F in my COTs. I make it clear that this is my faith. I'm not trying to change your mind or beat it, you over the head with it. But I really have seen F3 as an opportunity for me to share my faith in a positive way and how it's impacted my life. So hopefully that's a positive thing that people would take away from knowing me, I guess, through F3.
Well, yeah. Would you, no time like the present to kind of share your story here and your walk of faith, if you're willing to take the time to do so.
Yeah, sure. Well, not to get into too much in the weeds, but I was raised in a Catholic, with a Catholic background. So my mom was always very diligent about, okay, you're going to go to church on Sunday and you're going to go to Sunday school and all that. So I was raised knowing about Jesus and knowing about God. But, like a lot of people, as you grow up and you start getting involved, I guess my view of faith was, well, we're all going to heaven, and I might get distracted along the way and I get in trouble doing this or that. But the bottom line is I'm a pretty good guy. I'm not killing people and, robbing banks or anything. So I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. And that was, I think a lot of people have that perspective about their faith and about God. And God is a loving God. But the thing that I came to realize, and the way that I came to know this, was through my son. He went off to college in 2000, and through God's providence, he was roommates with a Christian young man, Ben DeVal, and Ben started sharing the gospel with Sam and taking him to Bible studies. And so our son Sam was coming home and was sharing these things with us, and he's like, "Dad, hey, did you know the Bible says this?" And I'm like, "Oh, the Bible doesn't say that." And so he'd get the Bible out and show me, and I'm like, "I guess you're right." I thought I knew what the Bible said about God and about who Jesus was and who I am as a man. So, long story short, it was through my son that I came to know Christ as my Lord and Savior.
Cool.
God really working in my heart. So that's really kind of the story. And then, he had invited us, my wife and I, to go to his baptism. He's 20 years old, and we're like, "Well, we did that when you were a baby. What are you talking about?" So we go to his baptism. It was in a Baptist church in Papillion. I still remember this like it was yesterday, walking into this church and hearing God's people singing his praise from the bottom of their heart. And it was like, wow, I have never heard this before. I've never seen this before. Well, then the preacher gets up and starts preaching. And after the service, I went to my son and I said, "You told him about me, didn't you?" Because he was talking about me. Sam's like, "I swear I didn't say anything. I didn't tell him anything." But it was the Holy Spirit working on me. And the preacher was just, sharing, that we're all sinners saved by grace. And it was the Holy Spirit working on me. And the rest is kind of history, that we came to know Christ, and my wife came to know Christ about the same time. And then not too far after that, all our daughters. And so it's a glorious story of the redemption and salvation of our whole family through, again, my son coming home and being brave enough to share the gospel with his dad.
That's so cool. It reminds me of like the verse in Timothy, right? That you often hear, right? Like, about age, right? It doesn't matter how old or young you are, right? Sharing your faith has a huge impact. And that's so cool that, like you said, he had the courage to do that. It's the other thing, I guess I'm curious, because when we talked to Miyagi, he met your daughter when you guys were on a mission trip, right?
Yeah, I wasn't even there. My wife and my daughters went down to the Dominican Republic, and yeah, but it was through the church that we had been a part of at that time.
Yeah, it's cool just to like think through God's kind of master plan and how all these like little pieces cascade and kind of intertwine and connect. And I love it.
Right.
One of the things that I think, because I'm right there with you. I've had, kind of a similar journey. Didn't grow up going to church, but went to church. Then I kind of faked it for many, many years until I was working through some substance abuse problems. So like I kind of have this event or this like thing that when I share my faith, like I can kind of point to and say like this is how I know that God is real, because he's shown up for me, and the number of times he's shown up for me is just numerous. But for you, have there been any events like that you'd be willing to share, or or what's been your sort of way that you've really in your life solidified, like this is the truth, this is what I believe, and I'm gonna live my life?
Yeah, you hear these stories of people, these dramatic come to Jesus kind of events in people's lives, and it's cool to hear that. I guess the way I would describe it is, when you hear the term born again, it's, it's a very Christianese kind of term, but for me, I was a breech baby. It was a very difficult birth because it took 45 years for me to get to the point where I can say I was, quote, born again Christian. And it was, again, experiencing all the, when you share your testimony, Plague, about your substance abuse, that was a pretty dramatic experience in your life. And I have to say, I've been through that, not to probably the depth, but I think we're all honest with ourselves. We all have addictions in our life, whether it be drugs or alcohol or pornography or money or work. And I went through all those. I traded one addiction for another just to say, well, I don't need that, but I need this instead. And so that's really I guess if you want to talk about my other part of my testimony, it's realizing that all those things are just dust when you get to the end of it, that it's, my purpose here in this world is not to be a successful architect. It's not to be, the richest guy on the street. It's not to be whatever. It's about knowing God. And then the second part of that is making him known. And so that's why I've really tried to focus in my F3 relationships to share my spiritual journey with other people so that they can at some point do business with God themselves. And, again, that it's all different for different people. We come to that point where we have to ask the question of who am I and why am I here and what's going to happen to me when I'm done, right? When I take that last breath, where am I going? And those are tough questions when you get right down to it. I can remember as a little kid when I first came to realize that one day I was going to be dead, right? Laying in bed thinking about, oh my God, I'm going to be in the ground in a grave forever, for eternity. And it scared the shit out of me. But it wasn't till 30 years later that I came to know Christ in a saving way. And it's such a, glorious thing when you lift that burden of, I'm going to be dead sometime. As we all know, that can happen. It could happen tomorrow, for any one of us. But to know that there's more to this world and to this life than just what is in front of us right now. And that's a glorious feeling. And it lifts a burden off of your shoulders that I can't describe fully because you have to experience it for yourself.
That's really well said, and I love it. And what's interesting is like it's like we all have this void, right? And it's like we go through life trying to fill it with all these things like on our own, right? And so, like you said, like whether it's porn, money, work, success, fame, drugs, alcohol, but not until you fill it with what was designed to fill it, right? Are you able to finally get that satisfaction that you've been longing for? And that's what I feel like I have found, and just pray that other guys would find that. I would be curious, how are we doing just kind of creating the space for guys to have those difficult, sort of deep, complicated conversations? Do you think we have a space within F3 where guys can kind of explore all of those things?
I think so. And again, it's one of those kind of a hard thing to, how do you do that without becoming a evangelistic kind of organization, and I think you just have to kind of leave it up to the individuals. I've had several conversations with different people that, after a COT that I've shared, have come back and said, what you said really made me stop and think, and I want to ask you some more questions about this or that. And I appreciate that, it's all in God's timing, and so it's not something you can force feed. You just have to let, again, I trust the Holy Spirit is working. I guess all I would do is encourage men to listen to that small voice that is asking that question in their heart. Don't push it down, but to open it up and let that question really resonate. And again, don't be afraid to ask other people about their experience and okay, now what? What do I do with this? That's I think the beautiful thing about F3 is that we have that conduit to allow those just kind of organic conversations to take place.
And, I love what you're saying about how you use it as an opportunity to share your faith and your journey. And to me, that sounds like an invitation to guys. Just to clear the air, if a guy has questions, are you okay with someone coming and talking? Because there may be guys that just don't know where to go.
Well, for sure. Yeah. And there's a lot of guys in F3 that, do a better job than I do in sharing their faith and are always having those kind of spiritual conversations whenever they can. But yeah, I guess my door is always open for anyone that would want to have those kind of conversations. But, again, I'm not going to try and ram it down anybody's throat. I guess the biggest thing is I can share my experience for what it's worth. And hopefully that, again, will prompt other people to listen to that small voice that is in everybody's, the background of our daily life.
I love it. Yeah. And don't wait, right? I love how you said, don't push that voice down or away, right? If you're hearing that, take time to explore it. 'Cause you never know, right? Maybe it's actual death or loss of life, but maybe it's something else, cancer diagnosis or something else that, I think just being prepared in the aspect of faith is something we all need to be looking at. I love it. And, I think one of the things, obviously, Fitness Fellowship Faith and then our mission, right, to invigorate male community leadership and clearly just hearing you talk, right, you have this passion for other men, right, sharing the lessons you've learned the hard way so that other guys don't have to do that. And obviously one of the ways we do that is with getting to launch or lead a site. So we'd love to just hear kind of your experience on launching the village. Would love to hear how you guys landed on the name. It might be intuitive if guys don't know where it's located, but talk us through what was that like?
Yeah, well, it's a little intimidating when you take on a new site. It's different if you're taking over an existing site because there's some momentum there, and at the time, I think there was some discussion about maybe I'll take over Dragon's Lair, which I think Miyagi was the site Q at that time, but at the same time there was a need to build and to grow sites in the Gretna area, and so I think the conversations maybe started with Grizz and just, hey, what about where do you think we could go? And so the idea of the new YMCA site came up as an option. And I just felt like I needed to help build the F3 in the Gretna area, and the best way to do that was to have another site opportunity on another day. So, we landed on the site out at the new Gretna Crossing Park, and it, again, it's a little scary when you're starting from zero, and there wasn't a lot of build up. It was like, hey, we're going to do this, okay. Let's do a pop-up, next week, and in 2 weeks we're going to launch it. And so it just kind of happened. Anytime you launch a site, you always have a lot of, support and people that came and showed up. And then once you get into the grind of the year, and then, this time of year when it's cold, we were kidding the other day because we were out there and it was butt cold out, and there's no trees out there. So, the moniker for the village is it's the coldest AO in F3 Omaha because it's just the wind blows like a banshee out there. It is a great site. There's so many different opportunities because of the park there and the YMCA, and there's lots of paved pathways. So it's a great string of pearl site. It's a great, really, you can do just about anything there pretty easily. We've had our core group of guys, and I'm fortunate that early on, we were out working out one day, and Bambi was running with me, and we were just talking about the site, and I'm like, hey, you ever thought about being a site Q someday? And he's like, sure, yeah, I'd like to do that. And I was like, well, I'm looking for my replacement, and so it was like, that was it. It was a done deal. And so this was like 6 months into the launch. So I still had another 6 months. So like a couple months go by, and I texted Bambi, and I'm like, are you still on? I'm like, he's like, yeah, I gave you my word. I'm on, man. I'm taking it. And so he was awesome. And I've really enjoyed getting to know Bambi, and he's done a great job of kind of taking it and making it his own site. Him and a couple other guys pre-run, and that's their thing, where I'm not a big pre-runner, but it's become its own thing. And we actually have coffee in the YMCA. The gal that is at the reception desk makes coffee for us. I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but so we have coffee on site in the Y, in the community room there. So, we don't have to drive anywhere afterwards, which is great. So it's a unique, and I think a site that over time is only going to get better as more housing development grows up around there. And with the Good Life District that they're talking about, I think there's a lot of great things in the future for the village.
Yeah, that's great.
I love that you got coffee in there. Have you EH'd anybody as they're coming from their gym workout?
Yeah, we have a few guys. I don't know that they've ever taken us up on it, because it's nice and cozy, warm inside.
Right.
So this isn't probably the time of year to get them to come, but
yeah. What would you say, because this is sort of a random question, but I have heard people refer to you as sort of the mayor of Gretna. Like, what would you say to that? Because you got us access to the new high school. You got we were able to play the Star Spangled Banner on the intercom at 5 a.m. on a Saturday. Yeah. Like, how do you have access to all this stuff?
Well, I work for the school district, so that helps, obviously. Okay. And I've lived in Gretna not all my life, but a good chunk of it. So I would never want to be the mayor of Gretna, but I do know a lot of people, and that comes with, some advantage. So yeah, Gretna's a great town. It's been a great place to raise our family, and it was a great place to grow up. And, again, it's just another piece of the whole metro area. Obviously, Omaha, Nebraska is it's a different, as we all know, having lived here for quite a while, it's a special place in its own way. It doesn't have mountains and water and all that kind of stuff, but the people are awesome. Just being a part of that, I think makes it special.
I am curious, because you're talking about Gretna, and it's just interesting because, at the beginning of this conversation, you're talking about there was not very many sites. They started popping up. You're opening up a site to help continue to see the growth. I mean, you've seen growth throughout your time there in Gretna. And we're seeing it all over the metro, right? All these different sectors are just blowing up. I guess anything you take from that growth, things we should be keeping in mind, things that you're proud of?
Well, I think that it all goes back to what wait time started back 6 years ago now. Is it going to be 7? I'm not sure. Anyway, the emphasis on, and I've been able to post downrange a few places, and nobody does it like we do it, other than probably, the mothership, back in North Carolina. But, always repeating what our mission is, always going over the 5 core principles and, the credo, never losing sight of those things that make 3 what it is. I think that's so important. And, we've done a good job in the Omaha area to always make sure that stuff is done. It's done properly, and not just kind of glossed over. So it's remembering where we've come from and why we're here.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So if you posted yesterday, you experienced what was dubbed as like the Sarpy takeover, right? Which was really just this cool, creative, like fun way to get every workout led by a Sarpy guy. And their message about kind of not siloing and making sure that we're staying connected. I was in conversation with a guy from F3 St. Louis, and he said, well, you've got 72 sites. Why have you guys not split off yet? And that COT from our Sarpy brothers really emphasized why. We get so much benefit from staying connected, and we just have put more leadership in place so that we remove red tape to launch new sites and make decisions. But there really is no reason, right, for us to like create 5 separate regions, right? It would be a whole bunch of unnecessary administrative burden, at least for us in the Omaha metro, right? Maybe in other areas that works different. But I love that. I think for us, our leaders have been able to remove the ego that would sort of say, well, I want to go start my own thing, and just keep it sort of as one, which has been awesome.
and I think that we've even within that, obviously the Sarpy guys are kind of their own, if you look at F3 Omaha, they've kind of created their own little mantra and their own little kind of niche, if you will. And I respect that, but, when those guys came out, they're like, oh, this is a great site, and I didn't realize how close it is. Yeah. So I think it was a great way just to kind of market some of the other sites around the metro area to guys that maybe wouldn't otherwise venture out. Because again, we do get kind of stuck in the rut of, I always go to this AO, on this day because I know the guys that are going to be there, and I kind of know what the expectations are. It's kind of neat to be able to go to a different site and get that, because it takes me back to when I first started F3, because it's like, I don't know the site, I don't know all the people. And so it kind of renews that energy of the unexpected of, when you're going to a new site and having a new experience. So it's pretty cool.
For sure. Well, Link, I do have to just say thank you. I think just throughout, our conversation and just my time, and even back when you were working with my mother-in-law, I think the sort of terms or words that come to mind is sort of steadfastness, long-term consistency or obedience, and certainly vulnerability. I think your leadership in this group really is making an impact. So I'm not sure how often you hear that, but I think, it's just cool hearing kind of where a lot of that comes from, how you got to where you are today and are continuing to grow and learn and lead and share those experiences. So just really appreciate who you are, who God made you to be. And now I know I appreciate your son, Sam, right, for just really bringing the word of God into your home and sparking that fire with the Holy Spirit there. So just appreciate you sharing here today. Would be curious where we kind of like to wrap up with, guys, is just getting kind of a current state, kind of status update or like a prayer request. Where do you need support, encouragement, or prayers when we see out there? What should we be asking you about?
Well, for me, it's not official, but I'm really close to finalizing my plans as far as retiring from working full time a year from now, right, roughly. And so all those plans are kind of in place. My wife just applied for Social Security today, so that's a big step for her. So just that transition to really from a full-time working stiff to a full-time retired stiff, and finding the next thing. I think the Respect group has done a lot of talking and read some books about the next mountain, and finding out what is it. Retirement is just about going out and playing golf. It's about just a new stage in life. And so that'd be my prayer request, I guess, is just, what does God have for me next that I can have an impact, whether that be through my church or through F3 or whatever that might be, that I can see that and be willing to take some chances and walk through those doors that God opens up in my life. So that would be my ask, I guess.
Heck yeah. I'm excited to hopefully get to watch from the sidelines and kind of see what that looks like for you. It's an exciting, but I'm sure there's a lot of different emotions or thoughts that go with that. So definitely be praying for you there. I appreciate you, brother. Let's do a little name-orama here to close us out. I'll start us off. Brandon, 39.
Plague. John Whitworth, 33. Pony Express.
Pony. Hey.
Pat Phelan, 66. Lincoln Logs.
Lincoln
Respect,
Logs,
respect.
respect. And these, and you throw up the black shirt crossbones, right?
Yeah, I do. When I first started, it was like, okay, you got to have your thing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out, well, Lincoln Logs, they kind of come together
Yeah.
in the
They
corner,
act like that, for sure.
So that's kind of my thought, but then it's like, oh, it's a black shirt thing. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
It goes both ways, and if the Huskers aren't playing well, you can say
Yeah.
it's the Lincoln Log thing, right?
Yeah, right.
Thanks for your time, man. We really
I
appreciate
appreciate you,
you,
brother.
Lincoln Logs.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys and all that you do for F3. So thank you for doing this. It's kind of cool.
Heck yeah. Have a good rest of your day, brother.
All right, guys. We'll see you.